Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
Wonderful. Just a reminder, you'll have 90 seconds, and just let me know if you'd like to speak on this. And for the audience, as they were saying, they may not have seen any of these bills and may not have information on it yet, but they do have their computers in front of them. We'll give them a little time to look them up. And legislators, I ask, if you, even if you don't know the exact bill, if you want to talk on the topic and what you look for in a bill, you can sure do that. We're going to start with Senate Bill 117, Senate Bill 117, and this is on driver's licenses. The question states, South Dakota is one of a handful of states that only offers driver's license exams in English. Senate Bill 117 would add exams to be taken in Spanish. Would you support this bill, or what are your concerns if not? And right now this has been referred to the Senate Transportation Committee and is scheduled for hearing next week. Representative Sullivan.
Yes, thank you. I absolutely support this bill. I signed on to it as a co-sponsor. I think it's important that we give people access to be able to drive, be able to get to work, be able to take their kids to school. I think this is a great bill, and I 100% will be voting yes on it. So I support it. I think it's a great step. It's a first step. There's many languages. There's a couple hundred of these languages that are spoken in Sioux Falls specifically and in South Dakota. And so I think this is a great first step, and I hope we continue moving forward on this issue.
Thank you. Senator Colbeck.
I also signed on to this bill, and a little history behind it. Last year it came before our committee, and the way it was written was there was a whole bunch of different languages, a whole lot of them that they wanted to be able to move into the licensing bureau. It got defeated last year. We talked to the sponsors of the bill, and we asked them to maybe to bring it back with just one or two different languages that we could start with to see how it worked within the state. And I think that this year they came back with a very good piece of legislation, and again, I will support this. I did sign on to it as a sponsor of the Senate.
Thank you. Representative Willitson.
Thank you. I think it's important that people that come to South Dakota, have the opportunity to participate in our workforce, to drive themselves to work. And so if it's helpful that they can take their driver's license test in a language other than English, I think that's a good thing. It's much better for them to have a driver's license and to be operating legally in our system than not. Last year I sponsored a bill to allow insurance companies to be able to print sales materials and such in a language other than English. And that bill passed and was signed by the governor, and that's now the law of the land on that part. And again, for the same reasons, I think it's important that people that come to our state be able to participate legally.
Thank you. All right, Senator Stalzer.
I guess I'm this year still somewhat undecided on this, but I was on vice chair of the Transportation Committee last year, and some of the reasons why it was defeated is that it was going to cost $600,000 just for the new software, and also it was going to cost $62,000 per language. Money that last year was not in the budget at all, and a lot of it this year will depend on whether the appropriators can find money for it. And although there is the other side that they currently can bring in an interpreter, so they're not totally blind as to it. And there is the aspect of can they read warning signs and so on the highway. They'll have to consider that.
Anyone else? Representative Hansen.
Sure, well, thanks for the question. Nothing about the bill strikes me as particularly problematic. I think there would be a need to demonstrate some sort of proficiency so as to be able to read our road signs. That doesn't strike me as a particular concern. I think that could be a component of passing your driver's test. I don't think that it's all that burdensome. I don't think it would be very expensive, particularly when we're limiting it to two languages, that we can translate that, and it wouldn't be that expensive. So I think it could be a benefit to a lot of people, and I anticipate, not having heard any real opponent testimony yet, but that said, I do anticipate reporting.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to our next question, which is Senate Concurrent Resolution 7, SCR 7, revising ingestion as a penalty. The question states, this would establish a task force to revise penalty and handling of ingestion of controlled substances to emphasize rehabilitation and preserve family and community ties. Do you support this? SCR 7. Give them a second to pull it up and take a look at it. Representative Sullivan.
Thank you. I am actually a prime sponsor on this SCR 7, on this resolution. I think it's a good resolution. I know that it is being talked about in judiciary on the Senate side on Thursday. This resolution is not meant to do anything within the law. It's just creating a task force so that we can study what the best option is for ingestion of controlled substances. And part of the reason that this resolution came up is because, as we all know, our prisons are very overcrowded and we need to do something about that. Having ingestion automatically be a felony is not necessarily a good thing. And so this is meant to, like I said, study this issue and figure out if there are better options. So I, of course, support this as I am a prime sponsor, and I'm very much hoping that it goes through. So.
Thank you. Representative Peterson.
Thank you. This is the first time I've actually seen this resolution, so as I pull it up, to me, the key is that we'd be looking at proposals regarding alternatives to imprisonment for those convicted of the crime of ingestion of controlled substances. And conceptually, I support that. I think we need alternatives. I think that for those who are addicted to substances, prison might not be the best alternative for them. And once they get out, unless they get help, they're inclined to probably commit the crimes again. So I would support looking at alternatives.
Thank you. Representative Willitson.
Thank you. Well, a couple of things about how our process works. The executive board, it's their duty to choose the summer studies that the legislature undertakes every year. Typically, the legislature can afford 2 summer studies. And so when we have a resolution like this that says, okay, executive board, one of those studies is going to be this one. Well, we could quickly, get past the number of studies that we can fund if every committee passed a bill such as this. So while I think this is a good idea, it's something that needs some attention, no doubt. I'm not willing to strap the executive committee with a mandate that says, okay, this has to be one of the summer studies. I would rather leave it open to the executive board to be able to, pick and choose from a multitude of options that they'll have to choose from for summer studies. So I would not support the bill.
Thank you. Senator Lehner.
Thank you. I'm a prime sponsor of this bill as well, with all due respect to the previous speaker. I do think it's very important. I think one of the areas that we really need to focus on is the fact that if you become a convicted felon, your life changes dramatically. And I don't think, especially our young people, our 18 to 25, 26-year-olds, really understand the impact of that. And so, along with the prison overcrowding, I think just the life-changing event that happens once you become a convicted felon is a big concern.
Thank you. Senator Sulzer.
Thank you. I guess being a member of the executive board, we already have a mental health summer study asked for 5 studies from us. The cost in special ed has asked for a study. This is the 7th request we have for a study. We can afford to do probably 2, unless the appropriators give us some extra money, so I guess I'm pointing at them right now. And I'm not sure this requires a study. It almost, to me, we've talked about this enough, maybe we ought to have a deal and do it if we're going to. But again, I prefer that the exec board have all the ideas together at once to be able to determine priority. Because most of the legislators will vote for this and not even know that the other 6 are out there.
Thank you, Representative Pischke.
Well, I just want to echo the comments of Senator Salzer and Representative Wilson. Also, David, we have, Christy Noel, the governor, has already made mention that she wants no further task force and increasing the size of government. And so we have all these ideas. I'm not saying this is a bad idea. We also had a task force proposal in taxation this last week to examine our tax code, which is a great idea too. But what we need to do is put all these ideas together and then examine which 2 or 3 we can afford to do and make those our summer studies during this upcoming year. So that's the way I would approach this.
Thank you, Representative Hansen.
Well, thank you for the question once again. Representative Sullivan approached me with this on the floor of the House, and I appreciated that. And so I've been thinking a little bit about it. And I haven't really come to any conclusions on the task force itself, but one of my thoughts at this point is that perhaps we need to take a wider view. Because if you read the resolution, for example, the language discusses proposals regarding alternatives to imprisonment, and here we're talking about a Class 6 felony. Well, under a Class 6 felony today, there already is a presumption of probation under what was called Senate Bill 70, passed a few years ago. So I'm open to the particular discussion about ingestion being treated as possession and that being a felony. I do think that there is perhaps a greater degree of culpability, at least you can argue, when somebody has ingested a drug versus when somebody's just possessing that drug. I think if the concern is our prison population, I think maybe it takes a broader approach. So I'm interested in having the conversation, but maybe we need to widen our lens a little bit.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to Senate Bill 8. Senate Bill 8 is based on the return on investment on the 211 helpline mental health services in South Dakota communities. Can you give your thoughts on the feasibility of passage as well as your position? Again, it's Senate Bill 8 on the 211 helpline. Senator Stelzer.
Thank you. This came out of our availability of mental health resources summer study. I'm actually the prime sponsor on this bill. And it is a helpline that currently is in 16 counties, which is 63% of our population. But we are also missing 37% of our population and 50 counties. So these people have trained mental health counselors a phone call away so that they can particularly handle suicide prevention. And we all know that we've got suicide issues on the reservations, we've got it with veterans, elderly people, and the cost beyond what we're spending now is about $300,000. Total cost, if the state were to take it all over, is about $800,000. So we're going to have a final hearing in the State Affairs this week, and then we will be asking it to move to the Joint Affairs Committee to see if they can find money to do this. No one argues that we need it. It's can we pay for it, and how are we going to pay for it?
Thank you. Anyone else? Senator Colbeck.
I'll agree with Senator Stalzer on this. Mental health is a big issue. And to be able to get in contact with that person that needs some help immediately, there's a very short window there. And if the 211 thing works, I would be very much in favor of trying to get that throughout the state. Because in that short period of time with that mentally handicapped person or whatever, that period of time is very, very short. And if a 211 call gets them the help that they need immediately, I would think that would be good. So again, we'll have it up in appropriations, I'm sure, so we'll be taking a look at it. Thank you.
Thank you. Nelson. Representative Sullivan.
I would say I would support this. Anything that we can do to help in mental health, I support. Anything we can do to bring our suicide rate down, I think we need to do. So I appreciate this bill. It's the first time I'm seeing it, but I support it.
Thank you. Anyone else? We will move on then to House Bill 1122. Again, House Bill 1122. The question states, society no longer considers and calls people with Down syndrome mentally retarded. Deaf and hard of hearing people resent being called hearing impaired. How will you vote on House Bill 1122? And it says this is scheduled for hearing in Senate Affairs next. House Bill 1122. I can pull it up. Representative Sullivan.
I am a sponsor on this bill. I think it is a very simple change, and I 100% support it. I've gotten many emails on this thanking me for signing on to it, so I very much hope that this passes, and I think it's a necessary change in our law.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, Representative Hansen.
Well, so this will be heard in committee that I sit on, and I'm looking forward to hearing the testimony on both sides. It strikes me as being a good change. I would want to be sure that by changing the language, we aren't triggering problems with other federal laws or maybe even some other state laws. But beyond that, I too have gotten a lot of emails on this subject, and I appreciate that. So I look forward to hearing the testimony, and as long as we're not, coming in conflict or otherwise, triggering problems with other federal laws or regulations, that I'm fine to support.
Thank you. Anyone else? We'll move on to the next bill, which is House Bill 1191. 1191 on industrial hemp. The question asks, is there a lot of support for legalizing industrial hemp in South Dakota? And House Bill 1191 on industrial hemp. Noting that this is referred to the House Ag and Natural Resources Committee. And advance.
Sure. Well, it looks like there's a lot of support if you look at all the co-sponsors of the bill. And I believe I should be one of those co-sponsors. Yes, I am. Boy, there's a lot of them. I support the idea. Some people have raised concerns about sort of hiding, some pot within your field of hemp. It's obviously has more THC. But the reality is, I think the reason we found that there's a lot of support here is because, it was recently legalized under the Farm Bill. And so I think there's a lot of excitement, and I think there's a lot of industry in South Dakota that is ready to capitalize on this. And so, to me, that's a potential area that we could use our South Dakota resources to add to the economy, and I think that's a good thing.
Thank you. Representative Pischke.
Thank you for the question. I also signed on to this bill as a co-sponsor. I 100% support industrialized hemp. I too believe there's lots of opportunities in the state of South Dakota, not only for our ag community, but also for production jobs in the state of South Dakota and in the medical arena. I mean, there's so many good things that can come out of this bill, and using this in South Dakota that I just think the possibilities are endless. So it's going to be great for our economy, great for our farmers, and great for jobs. So I fully support it.
Thank you. Representative Willetson.
Thank you. Well, I too signed on to this bill when it was explained to me, because the Farm Bill legalized certain industrial hemp products and such on there, but the definition of it in the Farm Bill was .3 or .03 of THC. I probably shouldn't talk about that because I don't remember the numbers exactly. And in South Dakota law, it's .06 or .6, whatever. And so it was to align South Dakota law with the federal law on that part. When you look at the list of products that can be manufactured from industrial hemp, I mean, it's just amazing, the different things. It's not just a salve anymore. They do a lot of stuff with it, so I'm looking forward to hearing the testimony.
Thank you. Senator Colbeck.
Thank you. I also signed on to this bill, and I'm a firm believer that it's going to be a good bill. Being born and raised on a farm and the way the economy is right now with that, this gives those farmers in the state of South Dakota an opportunity, to make a little bit more money and get a crop out there that will be hopefully, something viable for the state and for the country. Why I'm signed on to, I did have no problem with it when the United States Ag Committee said it was a good thing, so looking forward to seeing it come to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Sullivan.
Yes, I also signed on to this bill. I think it's a great bill. Representative Les Meister, who's the prime sponsor on the House side, has been working on this for over 3 years. I think it's a good bill. I think it'll be great for South Dakota. I think it'll be great for our economy. So I absolutely support this bill. I'm excited about it.
Thank you. Representative Peterson.
Thank you. I too am a co-sponsor on the bill. I do think it could be an important economic issue. I think that it actually could be very important to some of our folks on the reservations, and I feel like it's an option that we should pursue. It was brought up in the House last year, and if my memory serves me right, we passed it out of the House, but it may have died on the Senate side. So I support the bill.
All right, we'll then move on to Senate Bill 150, which is a similar topic on non-smokable cannabis product. The question states, SB 150 decriminalizes this. Here we go. Decriminalization is an astoundingly welcome step. Why not simply legalize it instead, at least for products like cannabidiol that contain no toxicating compounds? Senate Bill 150. Representative Pischke.
Thank you. I suppose I should probably just talk about this since I'm the prime sponsor in the House. What we're intending to do here is that if you have a small amount of marijuana and you have it in an edible, right now I believe it's a felony. And actually, if you have the same amount just in possession, that is actually listed as a Class 1 misdemeanor. What this bill does is it puts it in line so that it's the same penalty for the same amount. But if it's in an edible, right now it's a felony, this would basically be a misdemeanor. So it puts it both in the same category.
Thank you. Senate Bill 150. It's been one. Anyone else want to speak on that? We will move on to House Bill 1178. And it's House Bill 1178 on absentee voting. Question asks, do you support proposed legislation to roll back the period for absentee voting from 45 days to 14 days? Why or why not? Again, it's House Bill 1178 on absentee voting. Senator Colbeck.
I don't know where to go with this bill yet, but I've got a couple feelings about absentee voting. I think number one, as you probably know out here in the crowd, that we started absentee voting, I think last year it was in mid-September, and 45 days prior to the November election. In the city of Sioux Falls, there's an ordinance where we can't even go out and put up our signs or do anything politically on the streets up until like September the 6th or September the 8th, which doesn't give us, as people that are running for election, a lot of time to get out and meet some of the people that are going to be absentee voting, and a lot of those people probably are people that live outside of the state of South Dakota, or they are winter people that move south. I don't know if 14 days is the correct date for that. But I would like to see it maybe moved a little bit closer to the election date, just to give everybody a chance, whether they're a Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, or who they may be, to be able to get out and talk to those absentee voters. And as you guys know, there are quite a few that do it that way. So that's my feeling. I haven't really made a decision on it yet, and I'm kind of anxious to hear some of the testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Representative Hansen.
Well, thank you. And big picture, I want to make sure that everybody who wants to vote will vote. And I think that's the number one consideration that we should keep in mind when we're talking about this time frame. I tend to agree with what Senator Colbeck has to say, which 45 days does seem a little excessive. I don't think we need 45 days to get the county auditor or to send that letter into the Secretary of State. I think we can do it in less amount of time. I think the campaigns tend to drag on the longer absentee voting sits out there. I also think that facts come in as campaigns progress, and particularly as they get closer to the election day. I think we end up learning a lot more about candidates than we do 45 days prior. And so I want to make sure that people can vote, and I want to make sure people can vote with all the information that's out there. So 45 days strikes me as too long. 14 days strikes me as maybe a little too short, but I think there might be something in between.
Thank you. Representative Sullivan.
I think that we need to make sure people have access to voting as much as we possibly can. I don't believe I will be supporting this bill. When I was out campaigning, I started door knocking in August, the beginning of August, and as we got into the time of absentee voting, I had a lot of people that had already done it. This year we had more absentee voting I think than we ever have. I think it's important that we give people access to vote, and I will not be supporting this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Langer.
Thank you. I would just reiterate the fact that I think it's about voters being informed. Not necessarily, we want great access to voting, but it is about, I did hear several times during this election, somebody saying to me, wow, I've absentee voted and I wish I could change my mind. I didn't have all the information, not all the facts were out. We did, especially in the gubernatorial election, we heard that, I heard that a lot. So there'll be a lot of moving parts. Like I said, maybe the 14 days isn't the magic number, but sometimes we don't always get the right information or the important information to our constituents out.
Thank you. Representative Fischke.
Well, I echo the sentiments in regard to comments from especially Representative Hansen. But I do believe that 14 days is too short. I don't think I would support the bill at 14 days. Just because you have to remember, a lot of these absentee voters, I mean, they have residency here in South Dakota, but yet, let's say they're living in California or another state far away from here, and their absentee ballot is being mailed to them. Now, depending on the speed of the mail in other states and or getting it there, that may take 2, 3, 4 days. And so by the time they get that, they do a little studying, they do some research, and now they're mailing it back. They're running up against that deadline and actually get back there in time. So I want to see it pushed back at least to 21 days, and then maybe that point I think I can support. But I absolutely think that 46 is way too long. I mean, I've been on 2 campaigns now, and too many doors that I've knocked on already is that I've already voted, and I've never even got the opportunity to talk to that voter. So that's my stance on the bill.
Thank you. Senator Stalzer.
Thank you. The reason we have 45 days is because it was the number of days that were determined for the military to be able to vote, particularly those who were serving overseas. The federal government came in and said, if you allow one group to vote early, you have to allow everyone to vote. So my determination, I would like to see it shortened, but not at the expense of not allowing the military to vote. You can sign up to have the ballot automatically sent to you, so I'm not so concerned about the absolute numbers, but I want to make absolutely certain that our military is not, and we'll see what they do.
All right. Representative Peterson.
Thank you. This is the first time I've seen this, but I would support some version of shortening the time frame, largely just because it is difficult to get all the information to voters 45 days ahead of the election. but I would want to make sure that it did allow enough time for mailing of ballots and return of ballots and that type of thing. So it'll be important to try to find what that quote-unquote magic timeframe is, but I think some shortening is necessary.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to House Bill 1097, House Bill 1097. There's a couple questions. The main question here, what are your views on the removal of the law requiring the phrase paid for by on disclosures on political ads and materials? So what are your views on House Bill 1097, removing the phrase paid for by on political ads and materials? All right, Senator Salzer.
Having once forgotten to print that on some stuff, I have to sit there with a rubber stamp. But it's a pain, but I also think you're entitled to know where it came from. So I would not support removing that from the mailings and so on. I don't think it is important to know what group's backing it. But on the other hand, I do understand that it's not fun to stamp several thousand cards.
Thank you. Representative Hanson.
I talked to the prime sponsor of this bill just the other day. This also is coming before State Affairs, which I sit on. So I had a nice chat with him, and his frustration was that it just wasn't being enforced. And so if it's not being enforced, the solution was to just repeal the law. I disagree with him on that. I think, and interestingly, I think what he wants is more enforcement. So what we've seen, in this last year and in years past, is issues where somebody forgot accidentally, I think in most cases, put that disclosure on their materials, and there was no punishment, no prosecution. I think making a class 1 misdemeanor, out of somebody who accidentally makes that mistake is a little harsh. So I'm not going to support repealing the requirement, but I do think we need to take action to ensure that the law is enforced and applied.
Thank you, Senator Lehman.
I guess I would echo those comments. I think the bill is kind of a solution in search of a problem. I think the public deserves to know who's behind the campaign material, so I will not support this either.
Thank you, Representative Pischke.
Well, I also had a conversation with the prime sponsor and as did Representative Hanson, and basically the problem does stem from there's some people that ran this last time who were not putting this. In fact, there was a candidate in District 25 where I found signs that did not have the paid for on their sign. So if we're not going to enforce the law, the idea is why even have the law. So we either need to do something like this and not have anybody do it, or we need to actually enforce the law and have there be some sort of punishment for doing so. Now, I understand the idea that sometimes there's rookie mistakes and people weren't informed of the idea. Maybe we can sometimes just like you get a speeding ticket or you get a warning. Let's give people a warning, and then if they did not fix their issue, then you're guilty of class 1 misdemeanor. So that's my ideas.
Thank you, Representative Sullivan.
I don't think I'll be supporting this bill. I think we do need to have transparency of where funds are coming from and who's paying for them. I actually was one of those people that forgot to put paid for on my 150-yard sign, so I had a lot of fun with the label maker on each side, putting that on. But I still will not be supporting this bill, but I did get it done.
Representative Peterson.
Thank you. I think this bill was maybe brought to make a point and bring to light an issue. And I think that if enforcement is the issue, then we need to put the enforcement in it. I don't think it should be a class 1 misdemeanor, but we had an interesting situation with our state seal the last couple of years. And there were some versions of the seal that were being printed that were not the accurate form. And there's an agency in the state government that is responsible for following up on that, and they probably had a backlog of other things and it wasn't getting done. So what we did was just put in some language that just said that the Secretary of State shall issue a cease and desist letter. So, we could maybe fix this with something as simple as that, is to include that shall language and force the enforcement.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next topic here is House Bill 1048. House Bill 1048, and this is on closed meetings. Questions? We have a couple questions. Do you support House Bill 1048? And what other steps do you support in terms of open government and record? Let's start with that. House Bill 1048. Representative Hanson.
Sure, so this also came through House State Affairs, and I voted for it. I think it's a good bill, and keep in mind that I am a big fan, big proponent of open government. This allows for certain conversations to be had in executive session, but those conversations relate to matters of security. So, take for example, Southeast Tech wants to discuss their security protocols to ensure the safety of their students. If you have that conversation or some pieces of that conversation in public, then somebody who intended to do harm to the students would simply be able to listen in on that conversation and see what the plan is. So I think these conversations, at least portions of these conversations, are appropriate for executive session, so that's why I support the bill.
Thank you. Senator Stalzer.
Thank you. I am a sponsor on this bill. I guess one of my side things I do as a legislator is I'm on the cybersecurity task force for the National Council of State Legislators. And I very much believe that some of these security type things, whether they be cybersecurity or the physical security of our K-12 students or whatever, do not need to be aired in public. Just knowing what brand of firewall I use may allow you to get at bank records. I worked in the bank software industry. We had the internet banking for 700 banks and did the daily processing for 350. And so keeping what you're doing and even what products you're using secret can be very helpful to you in not having your personal information spread all over the internet and false accounts set up for you and so on and so forth. So I definitely support it.
Thank you. Senator Kovac, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Senator Stalzer on this. You know, being a businessman and conducting interviews, et cetera, with employees and or job reviews and like that, there's a lot of information that an employee probably would not want out broadcasted out across the internet or be in the public's eye. So I think this is probably a good thing, or is a good thing, and I will probably support this bill, or will support this bill, and appreciate the sponsor. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on then to House Bill 1175. House Bill 1175, this is on early education of pre-K. We have a lot of questions basically asking, South Dakota is one of 2 states without an early childhood education council. Do you support House Bill 1175? Basically, just most of the questions. Go ahead, Representative Peterson.
Thank you. I will answer this from an appropriations standpoint. Anyone who is following our appropriations process knows that we already have a number of things that we're not funding to the extent that I think we should be. For example, nursing homes, community support providers. And so, you know, we may need to have a debate on the merits of early childhood education. I'm not one for mandates. I think early childhood education is good. I think it's best probably done by parents, and those decisions made by parents, not mandated by government. But in addition to that, I think before we even have a discussion about funding something like that, we need to look at community support providers and nursing homes and other things that we've already got out there that we're not funding correctly right now.
Thank you. Anyone else on the topic? Okay, Representative Sullivan.
Yes, thank you. I am a sponsor on this bill. Creating a special advisory council for early childhood education is going to help South Dakota in the sense that we will get federal funding for early childhood education, and unfortunately not all families have the ability to pay for preschool. And starting our children out on an even keel and allowing them to have that education, I think, is incredibly important. When we talk about economic development, you know, we talk about all of these different things. It starts with education. And we need to be educating our children. There have been many studies done showing the return for children going to preschool. And it's a longer return. You know, there's going to be years in between. But we need to be investing in our kids, and this is an advisory council to figure out the best way to figure out how we can make pre-K a priority in South Dakota. So I 100% support this bill. I've been working on this bill, and I just think that we need to be educating our children and not allowing some kids to be left behind, because it's not the child's fault if they don't have parents that are able to get them into preschool. So I support this bill.
Thank you, Representative Espy.
Thank you. In regards to the former speaker, I guess I have big concerns of how much this is going to cost. Anytime that we say, oh, we're going to get free money from the federal government, it's important to keep in mind that money from the federal government is still taxpayer money. It's still you and I paying into the federal government. So as far as, I still believe that early childhood development is important. I support that, but I really pause at how much this is going to cost the state. And like Representative Peterson said, we have other priorities that are not being funded properly. Our nursing homes are closing within the state, and to me, I put that as a high priority.
Thank you, Representative Willetson.
Well, thank you, and as a couple of others before me have said, the cost is a big issue. Is education for our children important? Of course it is. Of course it is. That's a no-brainer. But we have to live within our means. Governor Dugard did, in my opinion, a great job of keeping the state within our means. If you'll remember, he did a 10% cut in 2011. That was a tough one. That was a tough one. So it comes down to priorities. My wife would like me to take her on a 4-week vacation to Europe, but we can't afford it. And so it comes down to priorities. We have to elect, to pay for the things that are of a higher priority. And I think those have been outlined from that part. So while, yes, I would love to support the bill, I don't think I can, given that, we're gonna have to pay for it. So, and the governor's already said, no new taxes. And that's what it's gonna come down to. How much do you want your taxes to go up to be able to pay for
That's
this?
your time. Thank you. Next one, Senator Colbeck. There we go.
Just a couple comments on 75. Being new in appropriations and being there, we've seen a lot of, we've heard many departments, 24 to 30 different departments come and present their budgets to us up in room 362. And one of the things that I ask a lot of questions on and has to concern with the federal money that we receive with matching funds from the state of South Dakota. And a lot of times there's stipulations by the federal government put on that, which these departments, they take and they say they need X number of hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to get matching federal funds. The question then comes, do we need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to get matching federal funds for programs that probably do not need to be funded at that level? And so, when you come to a bill like this, and again, education for our children is very important and very high on my priorities, and it's very high on the appropriations committee. But to fund something by just saying that we're going to get more federal money is not necessarily the best thing for us or for the state of South Dakota and for our taxpayers. So we will be looking, at that angle on this as well. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, Senator Spalding.
Just to follow up a little bit on where the money comes from. Currently, 50% of our general fund spending goes to education. 35% roughly goes to helping people, which is your Medicaid and those types of programs. We run the rest of the state government on 15% of what we collect. So in order to do a new program, we need new sources of revenue. And doing something like this, and then there's always the proposals to expand Medicaid. These things are going to, if done, require a significant increase in our sales tax or the implementation of the income tax. And I guess that's something that, you know, you have to decide which way you want to go on. The state of South Dakota has typically taken the position that by maintaining low taxes and low regulation will encourage businesses to expand and move here. And if we start putting additional taxes on, those things will not happen like they have. You look at the 10 states without a corporate or personal income tax, and most of the new growth is going in those states. And so that's a decision that has to be made, and at this point, I'm hearing is people do not want any.
Next, we'll move on to House Bill 1113, House Bill 1113, another education one. We have multiple questions on this, and I'm going to use one summation question. With the proposed bill requiring school districts to develop a code of ethics regarding teachers discussing politics in education, what is your stance or thoughts on this? It also states Sioux Falls School District already has a policy on this, and one of the statements near the end of the proposal is vague. So House Bill 1113, I have multiple questions on that. So who would like to start that one? Representative Hansen.
Well, I think that some of what's in House Bill 1113 is appropriate, and I think that some of what's in 1113 is quite a bit overreaching and probably too vague to even be enforceable. You know, for example, I think it's appropriate that our school teachers not be endorsing candidates in the classroom, and that's a portion of that. I don't have a problem with that. But then there are other provisions in the bill that talk about introducing into any class any controversial subject matter which is not germane to the topic of the course being taught. You know, I can't tell you what that is. I think a lot of teachers are going to struggle. And frankly, I think some of the most enjoyable conversations that I had in school were controversial subjects, not germane to the subject being taught. So, you know, if we're going to go on to pass this bill, it needs to be significantly amended. First, we should see if there's a problem out there that we need to address, and if so, we need to amend it to clean up a lot of that bad thing.
Thank you. Representative Sullivan?
I think this bill is very, very broad. I don't think it's a positive thing. This bill, in the form that it's in now, would make it illegal for teachers to make positive statements about former presidents, like former President Abraham Lincoln, for example. I think it's going to limit teachers. I think it's going to limit conversation. And I don't think that it's something that needs to be state law. I think we need to trust our teachers, trust our local school districts. I will not be supporting this bill.
Thank you, Senator Stelter.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm on this as a sponsor, primarily to start a discussion. I personally don't think the bill as written will have much of a chance of getting through, but it doesn't hurt to have the debate and see what might possibly work and might not. But I said there are things in here that I disagree with the sponsor. I think we should have the discussion.
Thank you. That was Bill 1113. Anyone else? We'll move on to House Bill 1225. These are transgender bills. There's also a reference House Bill 1108 and 1205. So again, 1225, 1205, and 1108. A couple of questions on this. What research or evidence support the rationale for the bills? If there are economic ramifications for the bills, what is the plan to offset? Your views on House Bill, again, 1225, 1108, and 1205. Senator Swanson.
The only one I have any knowledge of really is 1225. And that is one that says for athletics in schools that you participate in the sex that you were determined at birth or by examination by a medical professional. And I come to it having a lot of empathy for transgender kids, but also understanding it's not in the best interest of Title IX and the girls' athletics and so on, to have some 6'8" guy playing basketball on the girls' basketball team, or starting out the basketball is smaller, and so on. There are just plain differences in the physical characteristics. We just saw recently where physically a male won a category of the World Bicycling Championships. And he's standing next to two girls that are half of his size. And just, like I say, for the sake of the girls, and I say I have a daughter who was a NCAA three-time All-American, so, and in fact, she competed against the boys in rifles, so there are certain situations, but I have no problem with a girl wanting to play or be a kicker on a football team or something like that.
And that is your time. And next we'll go to Representative Bishop.
Thank you. Since I have House Bill 1108, I'll take the bullet here. The idea here, Senator Jensen actually brought this to me, and he had heard that he saw an article in the Argus Leader about this being taught in the Sioux Falls School District. I'm still waiting to see that article, but after doing a little bit of research, you can look out the Department of Education in California. It talks lots about gender identity and gender fluidity. I also have some stuff here. We're talking about the gender-bred person. To me, this bill states that it's something that will be taught in students kindergarten through 7th grade. To me personally, that's something that should be taught to the age groups, kids that age. You see I have my kids right here. That's not something that I want them to be taught. I want them to be more concentrating on reading, comprehension, math. Those are more important things to me, and that's the way I see that we should focus our education based on quota.
Representative Hanson.
Well, thanks for the question, and unfortunately, this is not a topic that can be addressed in a minute and 30 seconds. And I have had a lot of conversation about this issue over the last few days with people from all sides, people in the LGBT community, and people, just average people in the religious community. So it's a deep conversation to be had, and I hope that we all recognize that, at least from my perspective, and I think the majority of the legislature comes at this issue from a position of good faith. And I'm already getting emails that basically presuming that we come from a position of hatred and discrimination. That's just not the case. So I hope we can all recognize that. What the athletics bill does is raising the question, how do we segment sports and why? And traditionally, I've thought that we segment sports by sex, or by your gender at birth. And I felt appropriately so because of the sort of advantages that men just are born with by their nature, musculature, speed, those sorts of things. So it will be an ongoing conversation. I'm running out of time here. I'm happy to discuss it further. Obviously, there's...
That is your time.
Happy to talk more.
Representative Peters.
Thank you. I think there are a couple issues here. First of all, and I'm speaking specifically to 1225, related to the High School Activities Association. And there have been any number of issues. If you look at the rules that are encompassing for the Activities Association, it's that, so part of the problem is I think we have any number of bodies, including the Activities Association, making law through administrative rule. And I think we need to return that lawmaking ability and authority to the legislature. I think there are some issues that shouldn't be done by unelected boards and commissions. So I would support returning that authority to the legislature. That's one issue here. The other issue is, I was a state champion discus thrower, and I worked 4 years in high school year-round, training athletically, but there was no way that I could compete with the boys. They threw a heavier discus and a bigger discus, and they threw further. So I think it's only fair that girls compete with girls and boys compete with boys because of those physical differences.
You want to move on then? Oh, Representative Sullivan.
Almost late on that one. So House Bill 1225 regarding athletics, this actually already went through the Senate and was killed. So now it's being brought back again. And when you look at the South Dakota High School Activities Association procedure on this, it is very clear exactly what is being talked about. And when asked, one of the heads of that association was asked about it in committee, or when the question came up, there has been not a single problem or issue with this in the state of South Dakota. There has not been a single denial of the application for a transgender student to play. So I think this is a non-issue. I think it is an attack on transgender students, and I don't think it needs to be happening. I think there's a lack of understanding and a lack of knowledge of what it actually means to be transgender. And I think before we start legislating this, there needs to be more research done so that people actually have an understanding of what it means to be a transgender person. So I vehemently will not be voting for any of these bills. I think it's an attack on the LGBTQ community, and it's very upsetting to me to see these bills continuing to come up in South Dakota. So.
We will move on to our next bill, which is Senate Bill 72. And the topic is on abortion. Also House Bill 1177 and 1190 are referred to in multiple questions. Senate Bill 72, House Bill 1177 and 1190. This question states Senate Bill 72 would require doctors to read and patients to sign a form before an abortion. South Dakota obstetricians have stated the form includes factually incorrect statements. Is it in the patient's interest to make them read false statements? Another question asks, would you support proven methods of reducing abortions such as improved sex ed and access to birth control? We'll go with that. There's, again, 3 bills, Senate Bill 72, House Bill 1177, and House Bill 1190. Anyone? Representative Hansen.
Well, I'll try to cover 2 of those if I can get that in the amount of time we have. On the first question, which is the required information to be given to a pregnant mother before she has an abortion, those facts that are presented to pregnant mothers under South Dakota law have been litigated. And they were litigated up to the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, and the only way South Dakota could win on that question is if they're relevant, truthful, and non-misleading. So the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals has held, for example, that when we tell as a state, a pregnant mother, that before the doctor performs a procedure, that the pregnant mother is told that an abortion terminates the life of a whole, separate, unique, living human being. That is a matter of scientific fact. When the abortion doctor tells a pregnant mother that a pregnant mother has an existing relationship with her unborn child, and that existing relationship is protected by our Constitution and by the state Constitution, that's a fact. That's important information for a pregnant mother to hear. Planned Parenthood wasn't giving that information to pregnant mothers before we put those laws into place. It's important that pregnant mothers have the information so that they're fully informed before they make that irrevocable decision to terminate the life of a human being. And so that's why that's important.
Thank you. Anyone else on this topic? Representative Sullivan.
Thank you. I'm not necessarily going to speak to these specific bills. Like Amy said, there's 3 different bills on this. I think that when a woman unfortunately has to make a decision to have an abortion, she's not taking that lightly. And I do not believe that our state legislature should be legislating on a woman's body or whether she has the right to choose. So I will be voting against all of these bills if they do come to the House floor.
Anyone else on this topic? That was our last question for the day, and legislators, you will have 90 seconds for closing. And I'd like to point out all the bills, or all the questions we did not get to. I'll read a couple of the topics. You guys have a lot of questions today. Senate Bill 116, which dealt with needs-based grants for students in state colleges and tech schools. House Bill 1271 and 1236. An autistic insurance reform, applied behavior analysis therapy, education question on House Bill 1141, adjust certain maximum school district tax rates. Looking to roll back letting 16-year-olds drop out of school, that was House Bill 1232. Questions on transparency, special ed task, removal of barriers to reentry from prison, tribal issues, hate crimes, campaign finance, economic development, a variety of topics. If your question didn't get asked today, please take the time to either today speak with your legislator or contact them through email or by phone, and you can find their information on the SD legislative.gov correct email website. So we will start to my right here with Senator Stalzer, and you will have 90 seconds for a closing comment, and you can address whatever you'd like.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting us today. And I guess one bill that was not addressed today, which is mine, that I would like a little bit of publicity on, and that is to allow schools to maintain, store, and administer Narcan in the event of a overdose by a student. I guess I first ran into that at the White House with Kellyanne Conway speaking on it. Perry Broughton from Kello called me, looked into it, found out that there is a hole, that it's not permissible for schools to have it. It passed the Senate and is on the consent calendar and going to the House. And another one, but I didn't get time to write it down. You got me too fast.
All right, so 30 seconds. Do you want to keep going?
Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Representative Wilson.
Well, I would just like to thank everyone again for coming and participating in the process. Our process really does work very well. It works best when people such as yourselves participate in it as well. We would all love to have you email to us. Email generally works the best to contact us, but please, when you email, make sure that you put your name down, at the bottom of your email, and also where you're from. Just this past week, I've had emails from Maryland, South Carolina, Texas, Florida, you name it, all over. And quite honestly, I really don't care what they think. I want to know what the people in South Dakota think. And so, please, as the bills go through their process, give us an email, let us know. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Senator Colbeck.
I want to thank everybody for coming today and participating in this great process. I'm going on my third year in the Senate, and if you ever get a chance, come on out and just try to follow one of us around all day long. And believe me, if you're on a workout program, you will get a workout, because we do climb steps quite often, and I do appreciate that. A couple things. One that we worked on was the Opportunity Scholarship Bill, which we were able to get through, and that is going to be a good thing for our homeschool children. As you all know, there's three avenues to educate our children in the state of South Dakota. That's public, private, and homeschooling, and we finally got those on a fair basis. As you all know, that there's been a federal shutdown in the United States here, and fortunately they're back to work for possibly 3 weeks. We have a bill coming up this Wednesday that will give those people that are employed in the federal government system that are not working at this time or will not be working if the shutdown continues can apply to their counties on their property tax. You guys have all gotten the bill in the mail in the last week or two on your property taxes. There's a penalty to that if you are delinquent on that. And so we have a bill coming up, kind of a feel-good bill, to delay that penalty or take the penalty away at all if they cannot meet the requirement to pay their property taxes for people that can prove they're a federal employee in the department they work for. So some bills are very controversial and some are kind of good bills. And I just want to say thank you for coming today and thanks for inviting me.
Time. Thank you, Representative Peterson.
Thank you. 2 or 3 things I'd just like to add. You heard me talk a little bit about it before, but I'm elated that our governor has realized this issue for our community support providers and has taken some steps to increase the funding there, as well as our nursing homes. I think we could make some more progress, but I'm looking forward to working with her to get that to the level where it needs to be. You know, they are really contractors of the state. We don't go out to our highway contractors and say, you know, we'd like you to bid on this project, and then when they give us their bid, we go back to them and say, okay, we'll pay you 85 to 90% of what your bid was, and by the way, then we're gonna put all sorts of regulations on you over and above that. So I think we need to recognize that our community support providers are taking care of the most vulnerable in our society, and they are actually helping the state and providing services in the communities for those folks. A couple other things to watch is Senator Brock Greenfield and I dropped a bill last week to raise the issue related to insurance coverage for children with autism. That's a topic that has been looked at throughout the state in the last 7 years or so. Progress has been made. There looks to have been some speed bumps, and we're hoping to raise that issue again, and maybe we can fix that in some way once and for all. And then one other thing I just...
That is perfect.
Thank you.
Representative Sullivan.
Thank you. I am honored to be here. I'm honored to represent District 13 in the state legislature. This has been an amazing experience, and I appreciate all of you coming out and engaging with us. I think we could be here for a couple more hours asking questions and answering. I wish we could. I did want to kind of circle back a little bit when we were talking about the Early Childhood Education Special Advisory Council. And we talk about taxes and that it's going to cost taxpayers money, and I do appreciate that. But the return that you get on the investment is incredible. You can't deny the return on that investment. And it has been proven that when kids have access to preschool and they are able to go and start education before kindergarten, they become more productive adults. They add to the economy, and they're more likely to be a law-abiding citizen. So I just wanted to reiterate how important having a special advisory council in order to study this and figure out how best we can fund preschool for our kids. So I wanted to circle back on that. So thank you for having me today. It's, like I said, it's just an absolute honor to be here, and I look forward to hearing from you via email. I respond to every single email that is sent to me. So please, if you have an issue that you'd like to talk about with me, I encourage you to please email me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Representative Hansen.
Well, thank you very much, Amy, and the Chamber, and Southeast Tech, and our interpreters, and all of you for being here today. It's always good, I think, and fun in some respects to have these conversations. I'll have a couple bills up for hearing this week. One of them is a reporter shield law to make sure that reporters aren't prosecuted for doing their job. I'll have a couple bills on trusts coming up this week to ensure that we remain leading in the area of trust law. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot more to be discussed, as you heard, a lot of questions we didn't get to today. So by all means, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody. So thanks again for being here. It's an honor to serve, and I look forward to chatting with you in the future.
Thank you, Senator Langer.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for being here, and it is quite an honor to serve, and I appreciate just remember that you can always come and visit us, but you can also listen to us online every day at southdakota.net. every committee hearing, every day on the Senate floor and the House floor is live and broadcasted so that you can be engaged and involved in the process. If you ever want to testify in a committee, depending on who the chair of that committee is, we also allow telephonic or Skype testimony. So if that's something that you're interested in, if you really feel that there's a bill that you want to talk about but you can't be there. I also want to mention this is an exciting day for South Dakota. We had the USS Constitution. The Navy they're in Connecticut right now, commissioning our first South Dakota Navy submarine. So that's a very, very exciting day for us as well. So a little side note of kind of a humorous note, it's serious, but it's come up in the press about, or I've been contacted about a bill with inflatable amusement devices. So it's actually about bouncy houses. It's just how it came out as a bill. I've been questioned a few times about why I'm talking about inflatable amusement devices. So you can follow that. It's really putting some regulations in place about bouncy houses. Apparently some kids have been blown away when they've been playing in a bouncy house. So we're gonna get that figured out. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, and Representative Liskey.
Thank you so much. I want to thank the Chamber for hosting the event and Southeast Tech for allowing us to speak here in your amazing facility. But most importantly, I guess I want to thank everybody for being here and participating in the process. I'm seeing some friendly faces out there and people I know. I encourage everybody, if you have an idea for a bill, please get in touch with your legislator or any legislator. I see someone up here that I actually brought a bill for this week. Unfortunately, the bill died, but it was an idea. We presented it here in the legislature. So, the most important thing is for you guys to be engaged. Send us emails on certain bills that you feel a certain way. Like Representative Wilson said, it's important to also put your name and where you're from. I get a lot of emails too from out of state, and I might give it a brief read, but if I can't see it is from someone from California or Maryland or wherever, I don't spend much time on that. So thank you again for being here, and God bless.
Well, thank you. We would like to invite you all to come back for our second legislative coffee next Saturday, February 9th, here at the same location. We will have legislators from District 10, 12, and 15 at that time. Then we'll take a week off, and on February 23rd, again at this location, we'll have legislators from Districts 6, 9, and 14. Thank you to our sponsors, the Sioux Falls Area Chamber of Commerce, AARP, and the League of Women Voters, as well as the Sioux Falls Education Association. And in addition, we'd like to thank Southeast Tech for the use of this facility, USA Media for the wonderful audio services, ISI LLC for providing our interpreters today, and all of our great volunteers. And a thank you to the audience. Thank you for coming and giving voice to your issues and concerns. And last but not least, we'd like to thank our legislators, not only for their contributions today, but for their service to the citizens of the Sioux Falls area. Let's give everybody a round of applause. Thank you. Have a great day.